All right, so here we are to finish up the chapter on the market revolution. A couple changes to due dates. The packet and quiz are going to be on Tuesday of next week now, so because we have God Squads on Monday, so you'll just need more time in class to do the quiz Tuesday. So we're going to do the quiz and packet for Chapter 10 Tuesday. Chapter 11 packet is still going to be tentatively due on Thursday. I'll update that if that changes. So we're going to finish up with Chapter 10 now. It shouldn't hopefully take too long, and then we'll be done with another chapter. So we talked about immigration and transportation and how those two things kind of work together to create the industrial growth that is experienced in the northern United States, the free states during this time. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about some social aspects and the relationship between the Northeast and the Northwest. So let's get right to it. All right, so significant changes in northern agriculture. As we continue to move further west and populate these regions, there becomes less and less a need for agricultural bases of the Northeast to continue to produce a lot of the crops they've been producing. Why? Because basically in the Northeast areas, and we're talking about New England and New York and Pennsylvania and places like that, it's really not great land for crops. The soil has been tilled a lot ever since the colonists started coming in, the settlers started coming in, and it never was particularly great because of the climate. With the colder climates, the soil isn't as good. But you move a little bit further west to the old Northwest, which basically we're talking about Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, I guess Michigan a little bit, and places like that. Becomes a much better place to grow crops and continue agricultural techniques. So we see northeastern agriculture starting to die out largely in that region as they continue to become more industrial. So reason number one is that as these northeast states become more industrialized, they have less of a need for agriculture, and they're able to move that agriculture to the region that we call the Old Northwest. Now, we generally refer to it as the Midwest. And like I said, that includes Ohio and states around Ohio. So that's what we're talking about here. So we're moving that west, the agriculture, allowing the Northeast to become more industrialized, and the regions of the Northwest kind of pick up the agricultural base that is being left behind by the Northeast. So at the same time, though, we also see a good deal of some industrial growth in the Northwest. So obviously, this region is going to be primarily focused on crops and farming. Okay. As industry grows in the Northwest, we see that happen a little bit too. So, in other words, the crops that are there, the farming that's going on there includes all kinds of farming. Beans and wheat and corn and things like that, obviously. But we're also talking about in farming, we're talking about cattle, sheep, and hogs. Things that are used for food and making leather goods and stuff of that nature. And this forms a pretty strong industrial base in the Northwest as well. You have big manufacturing centers in the old Northwest, like Cleveland becomes a big one, largely again because of the Erie Canal. Makes Cleveland a good location, a good stopping point where people can drop off goods and wares, and you get a growing population. Cincinnati is one of the big meat packing centers, of meat packing plants, where you'll send livestock and meat to places like Cincinnati, and then the trains or the canals in some cases will take it further east to feed the people of the northeastern states, New York, Pennsylvania, so on and so forth. We also see a lot of dairy. You probably know Wisconsin is like a big dairy hub. So places like Wisconsin and, also Indiana and also Illinois and even Ohio a little bit become big dairy centers too. And they, of course, also send dairy goods, cheeses, and milk primarily to these northeastern states. So even though industry is primarily going to be in the Northeast, we also see the old Northwest or the Midwest, same place, also doing their fair share of industry as well. How does this happen and how does the South get left out of it? It goes back to the railroads. As the railroads continue to grow, that connection between the Northeast and the Midwest or the old Northwest, whatever you want to call it, that relationship continues to grow. Ideas are shared. As railroads are built, it only makes sense that more industry is going to make its way west as well. So who are the people that are going into these regions? It's a pretty big mix. To some degree, you're going to get northeastern farmers that realize that farming is much better in the Northwest, so they pack up and move further west. To a large degree, it's going to be those German immigrants we talked about a couple days ago that go and populate these regions. So the German immigrants play a big role here, and it gives them a great opportunity to grow and prosper for life in America. Okay. To a lesser degree, you have some blacks that go out to these regions and become farmers or employees of farms. Not a great number, but a little bit. So you get a little bit of a mix of people in the Northwest that go out and populate these areas, but they become, really predominantly German-speaking, not German-speaking, but German immigrant regions, because that's what Germans know how to do from Germany, so that's where they go. Like we said before, there's massive expansion in farming in the Northwest as they begin to feed the people of the North, as they not only feed themselves, but the people of the Northeast. This is made possible through agricultural technology, innovations, such as the McCormick Reaper, pictured here. Basically, reapers made it a lot easier to get wheat, corn, and other crops pulled and ready to be marketed. Basically, McCormick Reaper in a day's work could do like 15 times the work of what a regular group of workers could do. So that makes food production and wheat production much faster. Not only are they able then to feed the people of the Northwest and the Northeast, but also export a lot of those crops and things to European countries. So that's another strong economic base. Another invention is the steel plow. The steel plow, invented by John Deere in 1847, makes it a lot easier to plow soil and make your land more fertile to grow more crops. So we're seeing industrial growth be applied to farming here to make the farming industry more profitable for people in the region, right? And what we talked about in class last time was how this creates a real strong ties between the Northeast and the old Northwest, okay? What's tying these two regions together is that the Northwest is feeding the Northeast, and aided largely, of course, by the expansion of railroads, making it easy to connect between these two regions and growing the relationship there. Okay, so that is what is tying these two regions together. Largely railroads, the Midwest or Northwest feeding the Northeast, and we're seeing the North, these two regions of the country become much more connected and much more strong region, while the South is very much isolated and left out of that mix. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some of the social changes and developments that also occur over this time. Another effect of railroads and canals and all that stuff is how ideas spread around and get to more people faster. And ideas include educational opportunities. And all this stuff adds together to create a more modern society, a society that moves ahead further as communication is improved. One of the things that goes up over time along railroad lines are telegraph lines. They put up kind of telegraphs along the railroads, so information can be spread through telegraph machines and later telephones. So again, you're shrinking time and distance between people because you're making that connection much faster. Okay, we're seeing in some cases advancing roles for women a little bit. Again, women are still way behind the curve. They can't vote. They're discouraged to a certain degree from getting education. We see more girls going to school through elementary school, but higher education for women is still very discouraged. Okay, and again, this all goes back to what we've been talking about for a while, that old cult of domesticity. Limited opportunity for women because they're kept in the homes with limited opportunity to advance themselves educationally, economically, etc. We see women's education opportunities improve a little bit, but there's still a long way to go. For instance, in 1837, Oberlin College in Ohio becomes the first college to admit women. Generally frowned upon in society because they think, it's just going to be a place where women are going to go meet men and, it's going to be where they're going to have sex and get pregnant and stuff like that. So women weren't really encouraged to get too much education. But you're seeing it happen a little bit. It's a small crack in the wall that is separating women from opportunity in this country. Women at home and in the family, again, still largely caught in this cult of domesticity. But one change that we start to see a little bit towards the end of this time period are birth rates start to decline a little bit and families get a little bit smaller. This opens the door a little bit, at least, for women to pursue some of their own interests and things, leisure activities. We start to see a little bit, not much. Again, a big problem we have here is when I tell you something, you take it as an absolute. It's not something that's absolutely happening. It's something we're starting to see happen. That goes back to the whole idea of causation. Women are starting to chip away at the concept of the cult of domesticity, but they have a long way to go, right? We're talking 1850 here, okay? And it's not going to be another 70 years before women actually have the vote. So there's a long way to go, but we're starting to see some progress for women. More opportunities because families are a little bit smaller and things like that help women, but we still have lots of progress to make. Another thing that develops out of the industrializing North is a growth in middle class America. Okay, we see kind of the birth of the middle class as more and more people have expendable income. Things that, like new concepts we see, like people renting property in cities. Renting was a relatively new concept. People have expendable income, so they rent homes. We see more and more families moving into larger homes, not only the rich, but also middle class people who are able to live a fairly comfortable life in an increasingly industrialized society. Whether we're talking about people in farming communities in the Northwest or in the Northeast, we see really a quickly growing middle class that's quickly becoming a formidable part of the nation's economy. We're also seeing the development of social activities. Now remember when we started this chapter, we talked about how there wasn't really much of a unique American culture. Okay, this is in the 1840s we're still very largely British. by the end of the 1840s and in the 1850s, we're starting to see more social activities that people enjoy that are uniquely American. Okay, a lot of these things are derived from the stuff that the British do. People enjoy sporting events, particularly horse racing, boxing. Um, Baseball is a new activity. There's not a professional baseball league yet, but there's a different name for it. I can't think of what they called it. Um, but we're starting to see, people in parks playing baseball and things of that nature. Um, Reading is still a really popular activity, particularly amongst women. Women would form in reading clubs, and the rich, wealthy people would do that too. Other things that Americans enjoy are theater and plays. This Shakespeare. This is, of course, the stuff that comes from the British. Another thing, though, we see is something called the minstrel show. Minstrel shows were kind of like comedy-ish shows that were very racist, that were developed to and they were more popular in the South, but they kind of made fun of African American culture. Well, I'm sure I shouldn't say African American. They made fun of black culture, by pursuing stereotypes and things like that. They would have characters white characters that would dress up in blackface and portray African Americans usually as unintelligent, bumbling, and foolish. Minstrel shows really up through the Civil War until people started, to realize, boy, these are really bad, were actually really, really popular in America, and it's just a kind of another little dent in, the ideology of American culture of what we say is okay and what isn't. The circus is another example that people start enjoying going to. Circus has been around for a long time, but the circus grows extremely popular in the middle of the 1800s as people are looking for new and different leisure activities to, pass the time with. So that's a big change. We also start to see a stronger deal of social mobility, not so much from poor to rich, but amongst like working classes. And what social mobility basically means is people's ability to move between social classes, if they work hard and things like that. There's not a lot of social mobility in Europe because of the aristocratic nature of European society. But in America, there's a little bit more of it. And what we mean here by social mobility is, parents can see their children, say you got a couple parents that are farmers, they can envision a future where their children can move up the social ladder and be, more prosperous and more successful, whether it's in farming, whether it's in some kind of industrial position, whether it's through attaining education and getting more specialized jobs like lawyers and doctors and stuff like that. We start to see social mobility present a little bit amongst people over time. Okay? Now, the big problem, of course, which is still a problem today, is there's a very unequal distribution of wealth, especially in big cities. Typically, in big American cities in the middle of the 1800s, about 5% of families control about 50% of the wealth in America. So if you take all the big cities and take all the populations of the Philadelphias, the New Yorks, the Bostons, etc., you put it all together, about 5% of the families there control about half the wealth in America. So there's a big disparity of wealth between rich and poor. We have a growing middle class, and that's great, but we also have plenty of people that are incredibly destitute and poor. There's a lot of homelessness in urban areas. Homelessness and people being extremely poor is going to lead to higher crime rates, which is going to plague big cities. So again, some patterns for what we're seeing today, and that we've always seen: more crime and poverty in big cities. And then, of course, you have African Americans. There are a good deal of African Americans that are living in northern cities, either as former slaves that were freed, slaves that escaped the South, and they're living a really hard, scrambled, difficult life as well. However, what you always have to understand and say, as hard as life can be for African Americans in the North that escaped slavery, it's still better than the conditions that they experienced in slavery. So as hard as it is to find work, as hard as it is to find success in the North, where, yeah, they don't believe in slavery, but they don't necessarily believe in racial equality either, it's still better than slavery. Okay? So, what is the bottom line for Chapter 10? So to put it all together, right, the economy of the northern free states continues to grow through new economic and technological innovations, as well as a steady stream of immigrant labor to do the work, right? Those things are super important, okay? Your economy can only grow economically, obviously, if there's workers to do the work for you, if there's workers to fill the factories, if there's workers to build the railroads. You know, think about it. Railroads are a great idea, but if we don't have the population that's actually able to do the work to build the railroads, you're not going to be able to do it. Okay? So with the constant immigrants coming in from Germany and Ireland and other places, they're, particularly the Irish, are able to do this work, build the railroads, and expand the country industrially. At the same time, in the South, Southern plantation owners who control most of the power in the South because they have the money and influence. Remember, the South is much more aristocratic than the North to a large degree. Okay? So they, of course, continue to push and support a slave-based cotton economy and resist much of this modernization. This is, again, what we call economic sectionalism that I've been talking about for a while, that divides the North and South, and we see it really start to grow during this period as it becomes a continued factor in the growing sectional rift that exists between the North and the South, these two regions of the United States. We see the Northeast and the Old Northwest, or the Midwest, come together and really represent one greater section of the country, while the South is more and more isolated, more and more on its own, and more separated from the rest. I'll give you a couple more seconds to finish copying this down. Of course, you can always pause the video to get it down. Again, quiz is going to be on Tuesday over Chapter 10. It is going to be an essay. I'll get you the prompts beforehand. Packet for Chapter 10 will be due Tuesday as well. I'm still figuring out what I'm going to do about Chapter 11. We might run through it pretty quickly, but I'll let you know. So anyway, I hope all is well. I'll talk to you later.